COP29 is underway in Baku, Azerbaijan, on the other half of the world, where global leaders are racing to solve the climate crisis. The 2024 is likely to be the hottest year on the record and the past decade, the hottest in history. This year's conference in Baku, Finance COP, focusing on mobilizing trillions of dollars to reduce emissions and protect lives. Developing countries bear the brunt of the climate crisis, yet the West is responsible for over half of historical emissions. As nations and organizations in the global south strive to meet basic needs, how can they push for climate justice while advancing the new collective quantified goal on climate? And how can countries like China, Kazakhstan, and Brazil lead global climate efforts? To explore these pressing issues, I'm joined by Her Excellency Zulfiya Suleimenova, advisor to the President of Kazakhstan on international environmental cooperation. The Special Representative Suleimenova, it's such an honor to have you on CGTN, on Chinese television, our global network. First of all, can you tell us about your views on the priorities for this COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, and what are the primary goals of your country, Kazakhstan? How do you see the synergy between the two?
Well, thank you very much for having me. First of all, COP29 here in Baku, in Azerbaijan, is a really great opportunity for the region of Central Asia and Kazakhstan specifically to be on the map of climate action, to show what are our vulnerabilities, what we are doing, and also what are the opportunities. Very often, Central Asia is not as much discussed, and we think that this is a really great opportunity for us to really be there and to work with partners. This year's discussion at COP29 is around climate finance. And of course, climate finance is extremely important, including for Kazakhstan, because climate finance provides us with a better understanding and confidence in the ambition in climate action. Kazakhstan is very ambitious. As you know, our President Tokayev has announced that Kazakhstan will be reaching carbon neutrality by 2060. And of course, given that the majority of our emissions come from the energy sector, the energy transition is basically what we are speaking about when we talk about the decarbonization. We are very passionate about the climate action. We would like to accelerate it. Just a few days ago, the Ministry of Energy has signed a memorandum on energy transition mechanism, and we would really like to start working towards the decarbonization. And of course, as you may know, just last month, we had a referendum on the possibility of nuclear power development. So now, as the majority of population has voted in favor of nuclear power development, of course, we will be exploring the technologies and the partners in this area. But in reality, the nuclear power, but also our projects in renewable energy that we are developing, we have now already about 5 gigawatts of renewable energy that we are going to add to our energy mix. So all these things are basically a big parts of a bigger story of our decarbonization and energy transition. And of course, we are coming here with a very strong story of how the countries like Kazakhstan can decarbonize, lead the action in climate, but also really how much we need very ambitious solution and decision at this COP so that we can have a better understanding and better clarity in terms of what are the next steps and how we can move forward.
Help us understand the urgency for countries like Kazakhstan to tackle climate change. And you talk about energy transition, which I assume is a big part of your government's efforts.
As our president has noted in one of his remarks, even if the world will succeed in limiting the growth of global temperature within 1.5 degrees, which is a North Star of the Paris Agreement, for Kazakhstan and Central Asia, that would mean a 2.5 degrees increase. So basically 2.5 degrees is an optimistic scenario for our region, which means that, of course, the glaciers are going to be one of the very first ones to be hit. The water resources, desertification and so on, disasters are among the risks that we are going to face, and the adaptation will be very important. Back in 2020, I had a pleasure of visiting the Tuyuksu Glacier in the Tanshan Mountains. Why I'm saying about Tuyuksu Glacier? Because this is the only glacier in our entire region, which has been observed since 1950s without any interruptions. Even in the 1990s, where we had the difficult years, we were still observing the situation on this glacier. And we see that this glacier has already lost 1/3 of its volume. So that is going to be impacting the water resources, the availability of water resources, the disasters, and so on. So definitely we are already seeing the effects and the consequences of climate change. And there's something about Paris Agreement that says that if we will fail to mitigate our emissions, we will need to put more efforts and more money into the adaptation. So that's why Kazakhstan is doing two approaches. First, we are prioritizing energy transition and decarbonization. And on the other hand, of course, we are working on adaptation. Speaking of which, President Tokayev, during his remarks at the plenary session here at COP29, he said that Kazakhstan will be putting in place a comprehensive disaster risk management system so that to make sure that we can predict better in advance what might be the risks that are coming from the climate change in terms of disasters, floods, and so on, and how we can take preemptive actions on that. But at the same time, when I was speaking about the energy transition, we feel very passionate about that. This is very important for us. But at the same time, we also are looking forward to the partnerships, because the platforms and the programs like Just Energy Transition country platforms and partnerships would be critical to support countries like Kazakhstan. And we hope that we can really work with our partners on designing such platform.
Yeah, it's very important to have not just climate efforts, but also climate justice, right? Figures show that industrialized countries contribute to more than 60–70% of historical emissions, yet the developing countries, the Pacific Island states, for example, the Caribbeans, the vulnerable states are bearing the brunt of it. So how do you see the growing leadership or activism of developing countries in tackling climate change, and what actions do you see as important when it comes to collaboration among the global South? From countries such as Kazakhstan, China, and where we are right now, Brazil.
What is important is to really have the countries willing to take lead in certain areas, to lead the actions, the middle powers and the others. So we think that the countries like China, Kazakhstan, Brazil, and others, we can really show the example of how you can do. When we are speaking about the climate change, we all have the responsibilities and we all should be taking actions because we all are vulnerable. It is about really looking and being very smart and strategic about that. I think that there is great opportunities and to collaborate between the global South countries. We're working very closely with China. We have intergovernmental working group on environment, which I had an honor to co-chair in the past when I was vice minister. And when we think we are doing a really great job in terms of early prediction, disaster management, and so on. And I think there are really great opportunities for us to expand and really build on these kind of cooperative frameworks. I think that's global South countries. We are working together. We can exchange. We have experiences, and we definitely need to be really building on that and continue doing that.
Yeah, we know that you're also the inaugural high-level the co-chair for transparency at COP29. So what are your objectives in this goal, and how does a global climate transparency platform aim to enhance accountability and progress towards national climate ambitions?
Normally, transparency is something that is more technical. This is something that countries normally report on. This year, countries are submitting biannual transparency report. This is the first time when we are reporting under Article 13 of the Paris Agreement and the Enhanced Transparency Framework. Why does transparency is so important, and why the COP29 presidency decided to really give some more political momentum to this issue? The transparency is important for us to understand first where the emissions happen the most, where are the problems in terms of the climate action, and where we need to act the most. In other words, basically, the BTRs should help us to better plan our next actions in terms of mitigation and adaptation, and better understand what are the needs in terms of financial resources. So this really should help us to better act on climate. I really would want to use this opportunity to really commend the COP29 presidency for taking the leadership in elevating the transparency issue to a high level, so that to really create the momentum and more discussions about the transparency, because it is not easy. It's very technical. It's very difficult. Kazakhstan has been doing, we were the only developing country who were doing the inventories annually under the Kyoto Protocol. So we fully understand how complex this process can be, and really having these discussions to build the confidence and the trust in the process is very important. So we are already seeing that there are some countries who have already submitted their biannual transparency reports. There are more countries who are ready to do that by the end of this year, and hopefully we would be having a better understanding in terms of where we are standing with the climate action, in terms of carbon emissions, and where we need further actions to accelerate the climate mitigation.
Yeah, I want to shift gears a little bit. With advancement of tools such as AI and satellite monitoring highlighted areas, they're considered critical tools. How do you expect them to enhance our climate resilience in regions such as Central Asia?
This is exactly something that our President Tokayev was speaking about in his opening remarks at the plenary session here at COP29. He was saying that Kazakhstan and in general, we need to be using the technologies first in early warning system, but also in other areas. To give you an example, Kazakhstan at COP28 last year, we have announced that we will be joining the Global Methane Pledge, and we have been working on its implementation since then. And we see that the satellite images and artificial intelligence can really help us to better understand where the leaks are happening or where venting is happening, to really track the methane emissions where it was a bit more difficult to track before. So we're now working on putting together a regulation to be able to use the satellite images in the regulation of the methane emissions so that to reduce it. Nowadays, Kazakhstan is one of the best examples in reducing gas flaring and flaring mitigation. We have reduced by 70% in the last decade. Next step that we would like to do is inventing the methane emissions. When they happen, they are invisible, they odorless, and definitely using the satellite images to really identify and see where these are happening would help us to make very fast and relatively cheap interventions and really reduce the methane emission, which is basically a low-hanging fruit for the climate action. So I believe that the technology should be used, and we really need to be able to identify the areas where they can make the biggest impact.
We also know that financing is very important. At COP28, there was this establishment of a loss and damage fund to the thrill of the global community. 1 year on, how do you look at the value, the merit of such loss and damage fund? And on the financial side, what improvement have we made when it comes to increasing financing and lowering costs for the developing countries?
Kazakhstan is the alternate member of the board of the Loss and Damage Fund. This year, the teams have been working very hard on some of the modalities of its work. But what I really want to say is this year, Kazakhstan was hit by floods in spring, causing lots of losses and damages. Of course, that really resulted in a situation when we had to redivert some of our financial resources, which we could have spent on decarbonization and energy transition onto recovery. So in this context, one of the big lessons that we've learned is that the mechanisms like loss and damage fund are extremely important to really support the countries when the loss and damage did happen as a result of climate change. Of course, we still need to think about the smart ways of how to operationalize it better, how to support the countries, but also the loss and damage should not be going alone. We still need to be complementing it with the mitigation action, but also really enhancing the adaptation in the countries. And this is one of another topics that is being discussed here at COP29, that is increasing the adaptation finance in developing countries, which is also very important.
Looking ahead, COP30 will be held in Brazil, where I'm right now covering the G20 summit. Looking ahead to Brazil, a country known as biodiversity, the lung of the earth, where Amazon is. How do you expect that project, the COP30 in Brazil, to play a role in helping and advancing our fight against climate change?
I think COP30 in Brazil would be very much linked to the results of COP29 here in Baku. In that sense, we see the new initiative, which is called Troika, to make sure that the different presidencies, they have the continuity in the process, and of course the mitigation, adaptation. And next year we're going to go to Brazil with new updated NDCs, where we are going to identify new actions and new ambitions. Of course, these all are very interconnected, and we hope that Brazil can really take on the discussions that will happen here, and will really add some additional ambition and some additional aspects to the discussions.
Very good, very good. And how do you think forums such as COP29 and G20 can foster deeper synergy and collaboration among the developing countries to address shared challenges such as climate change, but not only, we also have inequality and sustainable development?
The platforms like COP29 are very important because they do really promote the sense of the international community and community in general. Because when we're acting on climate, it's not about what one country is doing or two countries are doing. It is either that we finish the marathon when the very last runner crosses the finish line. So we all have to cross the finish line, and therefore, of course, really having this community, really having these discussions, exchanges, and really acting together. By acting together, we can mitigate this big climate catastrophe that is happening. So hopefully, we will be able to finish.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to finish it together. Finally, how do you look at China's role in the fight against global climate change?
China is a very important actor in this, and we're seeing a very strong leadership of China. I was just a few days ago, I was attending the summit on methane and non-CO2 emissions, which was co-organized by China as well. And I heard very strong actions that are being undertaken by Chinese government. I think there are some things that we can really exchange. We know that China, for example, has adopted a legislation on coal mine methane mitigation. So there are very strong actions that are being undertaken, and we believe that China is a very important. It is one of the big emitters, and therefore it is a very important actor. And we think that China can also really consolidate some very strong and inspire action among other countries. We think that China should also be leading these actions and show some good example to the rest of us.
Special Representative Suleimenova, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your time in Baku, and kudos to your work.
Thank you very much.
And that'll do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN and Wang Guan in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Greetings again. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you again next time.